Welcome to Indianxclusive TV channel, a platform where people from around the world come together to engage in meaningful conversation. I'm your host, Jos Philip, and today we embark on a new chapter bringing our discussions to you in English. This step is not just about language, it is about breaking barriers and creating a space where ideas and perspectives transcend boundaries, cultures, and religion. Our focus today is both timely and compelling. Trump and South Asia, key issues and potential role in geopolitics. This is a topic that touches on the intersections of power, diplomacy, and the ever shifting dynamics of the global order. To guide us this fascinating exploration, I am honored to welcome a distinguished expert in American politics, Mr. Vinson Palathingal. With his deep insights and sharp analysis, Mr. Palathingal will help us unpack the complexities of Trump's policies and their ripple effects across South Asia and the broader geopolitical landscape. The quadrilateral security dialogue between US, India, Japan, and Australia seeks to counter China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Mr. Vinson, could you please explain the concept of Quad and share your thoughts on what approach a potential second Trump presidency might take towards this strategic alliance?
Thank you, Dr. Philip, for having me. Absolutely. When you look at Quad, the Quad countries, that is US, India, Australia, and Japan, they represent $34 trillion worth of GDP. So you know that free navigation in international waters is so critical for all these countries to have these trade routes safe and secure, and so that this GDP, this growth, and all of this affluence that we have out of this trade can continue. So when China is developing its hegemonic presence in the South China Sea, we are having a problem there. So because they're going to start controlling the navigational rights of different nations in the region. So in that scenario, definitely there has to be a military presence from stronger nations in that area to make sure that China's hegemony, China's influence in that region is not becoming a problem for these countries to conduct their trade. So that is why these countries, these four strong countries in the area, has to make sure that they have an alliance in place, and that alliance can counter China's big weight so that all other nations in the South China region, South China Pacific region, can exercise their right to have free navigation through international waters. And definitely that is where we are going to head under Trump 2.0. Under Trump 2.0, I mean Trump 1 is when we started the Quad discussions, and it continued even under President Biden. It continued because it's so important for all these nations to have this alliance in place. And I'm sure with Trump back in the office, it's going to get additional momentum, and we're going to make sure that the Quad alliance get to a formal pact between these nations so that we can preserve the international waters in the region.
Thank you, Mr. Vinson. India joining a BRICS currency initiative may not be a good idea for several reasons, primarily rooted in economic sovereignty, strategic interest, and practical challenges. Can you please explain all these risks?
Absolutely. See, these big nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, they represent 40% of the world's population and 25% of global GDP. So they're definitely a power bloc. But if they move from US dollar to the BRICS currency as the trading currency, then the equation is going to change. Then definitely who is the bigger player in BRICS is going to decide what's the future of all these nations that are part of it. So if you look at it, China represents 40% of the BRICS nations' economy. So that way, when you look at India's situation with China, China is a geopolitical adversary, and China is for sure making sure that their currency, their value in the world is being accentuated by this BRICS currency. So India has to make sure that before you decide any of such moves, India has to make sure that India is doing it in the best interest of its own economy, its own geopolitical ambitions, its own geopolitical situation with China. So if you look at other nations, Russia and proposed member Iran, they're autocratic powers which are having so many issues in the international situation with other countries. And China definitely is an autocratic state, authoritarian state, and Brazil and South Africa, they're not functioning democracies and they have their own share of economic problems, on their own. So why India has to associate with these nations? And then potential members are UAE, again, another autocratic nation that is proposed to be part of BRICS. Why India has to be in alliance with these nations? There is nothing wrong in having an alliance, BRICS, but when you have a currency, a common currency, all the problems from these countries can affect the future of that currency and can affect the future of the members of that currency consortium. So that is not in the best interest of India to align with these nations. India, on the other hand, is a democracy. India has to be strongly aligned with the other major democracy in the world, that is the United States. So in my opinion, an axis between these two democracies, the East and West, India and the United States, being very functional democracies, being very strong nations, that is what should be the future of the economic order of the world. Because when you have a democracy, there are big democracies like India and China, they represent people. So what we need is the representation of common man and woman on all these decisions that we make. If India aligns with the autocratic states, that is not going to be the case. So that is why an alliance between India and US, and of course, as Trump has tweeted, US is going to take it very seriously, because if this currency is formed, that is definitely going to impact US dollar in a very negative way. US dollar is the current world reserve currency. Everybody do their trade in US dollars. So that's going to be very bad for the American economy if that becomes a reality and if that becomes a success. And that is not going to be taken lightly by the US government. And if you look at Modi and Trump, having their personal chemistry, having, Howdy Modi that is arranged in Houston for Modi and Namaste Trump that was in Gujarat for Trump, they have a very good personal rapport at this moment. So them being in the office, I'm almost certain there is not going to be any future for BRICS currency proposals. But at the same time, no matter who is in the office, it is not in the best interest of India to have such an alliance with these rogue nations who are not democratic countries. So that is why absolutely India should stay away from BRICS currency proposal. India should outrightly reject it. India should be in league with United States and other democratic nations to make sure that India has its fair share of the game and India has its place in the world, not associating with China, a geopolitical adversary and an economic adversary for India that is in the best interest of India.
Actually, China's militarization of South China Sea threatens the regional security and freedom of navigation. What approach do you think Trump would take to address this threat?
See, all these nations in the that area, in the China Pacific region, they are all having issues with China. And they're smaller countries. So one way to handle them is you can handle them individually. But at the same time, China is a huge power. These countries are not in a position to deal with China on their own. So they are looking for help. They're looking for support. And that is where United States has to remain engaged in that area. And that is where the Quad Alliance, as I said in the first question, mentioned, that Quad Alliance has to remain very strong. It has to become very strong so that the military presence in that region by these Quad countries, that is what is going to protect the South China Sea. Because there are small nations who are doing trade. They are not in a position to counter China. So these nations, these strong nations, Australia, India and Japan, has to align with the United States to make sure that militarily the waters, international waters are protected and make sure that the small countries don't have to deal with the hegemony of China. And that is how it's so important for US to remain engaged in that region and to form this Quad alliance with these four great powers around that region.
Coming to visa programs, and H-1B visa program allows high skilled workers mainly from South Asia to work in the US. There are many rumors surrounding the future of the H-1 program under Trump. What do you think his approach should be in this matter?
See, President Trump is a pragmatic leader. So he looks at solutions. He's a businessman. He looks at problems, and if he sees there is a problem, then he looks for a solution. So I was an H-1 employer for a really long time. I have done hundreds of H-1s. I have sponsored so many green cards. And I know from my own personal experience how dysfunctional this system is currently. So a businessman leader, President Trump, when he looks at this, a very dysfunctional, very faulty system of this H-1 visas for tech workers, then he's definitely going to think about revamping it. And if it is so difficult to fix whatever we have, then maybe it is time to think of a new approach. Look at other countries, how they are doing it, learn from their experience, and learn from our own experience, the US's own experience dealing with these problems, and come up with maybe a new system for tech workers to come and work in the United States. We need the talent. I know that there is technology talent shortage in this country because of our education system and STEM being not giving enough importance. But those long-term fixes to have our own talent, it's going to take some time. In the meantime, we need technology talent. We need engineers. How can they come here and work? And in my opinion, connecting the H-1 visas to this green card and permanent residency and then eventual citizenship, that is what complicates the issue. So if you keep the work visa for its intended purpose, that is, people come here to work and then they go back home after the work, with a limited period of H-1 period, not H-1 or whatever the visa that's going to be. That is the solution, in my opinion, because the green card backlog for Indians is creating hell a lot of problems for these Indian families. There are hundreds of thousands of people waiting in this H-1 lottery, H-1 lane to get the green cards. I mean, because they have approved for green cards, but they cannot get it because of the countrywide ceiling. So all of this is because it's connected. They come on H-1 and then they start sponsoring green card through their employer. That is because H-1 is a dual intent visa that you can come here for work and go back, or you can come and try for your residency. If you're dealing that for the intended purposes, what it was for originally, people come here, work, and then they go back home. Then that need for all this wait and everything for green card is going to be over, and then we can be more selective about the green card process. Not everybody who is going to come here on H-1 is going to try for green card. We have excellent talent coming from India. 200,000 people, come to the United States from India as foreign students on F-1 visas, and a good percentage of them come from very good institutes. And these are the people who started this so many technology companies in the Silicon Valley and all that. If you look at even the bigger corporations like Google and Microsoft and all that, they're headed by these Indian students who came here and decided to stay back and become citizens. So United States has benefited tremendously from the technology talent that came from India as students. So what we need to make sure is we have a speed route, a faster track for them to get their green cards instead of going through this H-1 vicious cycle. So that's what President Trump has proposed, that we will consider thinking about giving them green cards right out of school. And again, it's not possible for 200,000 people to get green cards right away. A lot of universities are not having the necessary standards to bring in quality students from India. They're coming from, not great institutions. So for the great students who come from India, from great institutions with great skills, those are the people that we should consider and expedite to give them green cards if they're interested to stay back. That way they can start their life early in this country, they can create more jobs, they can be more productive as citizens instead of waiting in this green card line forever. So that is the approach that we need to take. Attract the top talent using quicker, faster ways of them getting green cards, and make sure that the H-1 visa, the work visa program remains a work visa, temporary work visa program. They come, work, and then they leave after the work is over. And another thing that is good that can happen about this is because hundreds of thousands of people come to the United States on these different visas, and when their numbers increase significantly in one area, they form pockets, they form their own islands, and that is not really good in the long-term interest of the United States to have some level of a country that everybody can share with the a common understanding of the culture, the civilization, the history of the nation. That's not what is happening. There are a lot of pockets forming with different types of people coming from different countries and forming their own islands in the civilization, in the society. That also needs to be controlled, because a president cannot look at a country developing so many different types of many nationalities within the nation. That is not acceptable. So all of this can be controlled if you look at whatever has happened in the past, from the 1990s when H1 visas were introduced. So if you learn from that history, and if you make sure that we learn our lessons and we learn the lesson from other countries, and we can implement a newer system, a much more efficient system that will remove the problems that were in this H1 visa situation right now. That's what President Trump is going to look at. He's a solutions-oriented person. So he's going to look at what we were going through and what we can do to fix it. And that is how things are going to evolve. And that should not be a reason for India to be alarmed. India definitely is a strategic partner for India in so many ways, in Quad alliance and all the international peace situations. And the world needs India's help, and the US is going to definitely work with India. But these H1 visas should not be a problem, a thorn in the flesh between these relations between India and the United States. And one more thing that you have to think: when this H1 boom was happening in the 90s and the early 2000s, the situation in India was very bad. The technology folks, the engineers who were graduating out of these colleges, they were not getting jobs at that time. That has changed. India is a very growing, very flourishing economy at this point, and there are a lot of opportunities there itself. So why we have to continue to support this brain drain that is happening for India when there is no real need for it? Indian economy has a lot more opportunities. So the craze for the H1 visas like we used to have in the 90s and 2000s, that is not there anymore. So these are all factors that we have to consider when we look at a new solution for this ongoing problem.
Thank you, Mr. Vinson. Your insights are really inspiring. Actually, American dreams are always exist, and it is going on. Then we coming back to strengthening the defense try to counter China and bolster regional stability. The Trump and Modi share a special relationship, as evidenced by the how you told, Howdy Modi and Namaste Trump events during his first presidency. Where do you think the defense cooperation between these democratic giants will lead in a Trump's next term, with Modi as India's PM throughout?
The defense cooperation has increased tremendously in the past, and it's all the reality that the world is facing, because China's economy is growing, China's geopolitical interests are growing, China is buying influence in so many countries by making them indebted to them, giving them predatory loans. So the situation has changed. So who is a country in that region who can be a counter to China? And the only country that can be a counter to China is India. So definitely the situation has changed from time ago. So that is where we see that the increasing importance of India for the United States strategy in that region, because India is the only force that can really counter China in that region. And when it comes to countering, I'm not saying it for the sake of having military confrontation, but you have to understand, China is an authoritarian state. People have no rights there. So we cannot really keep on supporting such nations to grow in power, and then they become controlling powers in the region wherever they are. And then eventually they are growing beyond that, and they're starting to control the world. So that is where United States see the danger. The China's economy grew with the help of the United States becoming dependent on their production facilities in China. But now, maybe it's an opportunity for some of those supply chain has to move to India and start production in India. So a lot of these companies can move into India, and India has become much more business friendly than before. So all of these are playing, in the best interest of India at this point. So India has to use this, have a very strong alliance with the United States to make sure that India is going to exercise its power in the region and making sure that India plays its role in the world. So that is where India has to be, kind of look at that Quad alliance. That's one thing that we discussed earlier. Maybe India has to have, some kind of a pact with the United States. I really propose that India and US, being the strongest and the largest democracies in the world, we should form an axis of democracies to make sure that people's rights, their liberties, their freedoms, their opportunities are not controlled by regimes and governments. Governments are important, but at the same time, the role of the government is to help the population, but if not to control them. So when it is becoming a controlling issue, that is where the world has to realize an axis between these two major democracies is what has to control the future direction of the world, to give people, citizens everywhere rights and liberties and freedoms and opportunities. And that is where the alliance between India and US is so critical, not just for the region, but for the entire world.
We have limited time, so we concern for two questions only. What do you think Trump's approach would be toward energy cooperation between nations like India and the United States?
See, energy, in terms of energy, US is already exporting, natural gas and even gasoline, petrol to India. So India and US, their energy trade is increasing heavily. But if you look at the region, this is the way I look at it. All these countries in the region, in South Asia region, are looking for more energy sources, affordable energy sources. And China is playing a role there and going into these countries and flooding them with money, using predatory loans where the country is becoming indebted to China. And when they cannot pay off the loan, when they cannot meet the payment requirements, the Chinese take over the facilities. And that is happening all around in the South Asia region with many countries, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, all of them. So that is where India, being a people's power, a democracy, has shown that Indian help for countries like Bhutan or Bangladesh, India provides these loans at a much more friendly terms. Sometimes they produce more electricity and export back to India instead of paying them right away upfront when they do the projects. So what is happening is we are really seeing the difference between a democracy helping another country versus a authoritarian state like China helping other countries. Their approach is different. But India can benefit by having US involved in the equation in terms of technology transfer and making sure that India can offer more help to these nations and making sure that affordable energy is available to all these nations in the region, the South Asia region. And that is where, again, India, United States cooperation and partnership and deals that they can come up with can make sure it is going to be a positive for the entire South Asia region, not just between India and the United States.
India has faced accusations of human rights violations against religious minorities. What do you think Trump's approach would be in addressing this issue?
See, as I said again earlier, Trump is a very pragmatic leader. Trump sees the real issue. So if you look at Trump's history, Trump's experience in the United States, he just said, make America great again. All of a sudden, the entire media, the entire left liberal wing party of the Democratic Party made him look like a racist. They started telling that he's a white racist, supremacist, he's like Hitler, all of that. Why? He just said, make America great again. He said, Merry Christmas, in a country where 70% of the people have something to do with Christianity, where he said, Merry Christmas. So even for these minor things that he or his culture, the way he was raised, all of a sudden he was called a racist. And that's the same thing that is happening to Modi to some extent in India. Yes, India had issues in the recent past in Manipur and all of that. I'm not saying that it is completely trouble-free or anything, but at the same time, if you look at the reasons for India's religious strife, that is from the get-go, India had problems. Like, India was formed with a big division between, two religions, Hindus and Muslims, between India and Pakistan. So always there was religious strife. But now it is getting a lot more attention because Modi is in power. Because Modi is a Hindu leader. Modi is, known to be talking about Hindu culture, civilizations, India's pride, and all that. So all of a sudden, everything he talks about is considered anti-minority, anti-others. So that is why it is getting too much attention. I'm not saying that there are no issues. That issues needs to be addressed. But just the same way, Trump is called a racist here, Modi is being called a Hindu nationalist or whatever. So this we have to take into account and then make sure that the friendly relationship between Modi and Trump plays a role in kind of making the situation better. Somehow dialogue has to happen, and that is where the personal relation with the leaders can be playing a major role. So that is where I see that Trump and Modi is going to address these issues, not in an aggressive fashion, no threats and stuff like that, but at the same time making sure that Indian issues that are affecting minorities, minority religions are being addressed. And in a quiet way, of course, not without straining the relationship between the two nations. And that is where I hope this understanding of President Trump about what is happening, instead of just being a knee-jerk reaction about something that flares up, that is what is going to come in handy at this moment. So, and India's record is improving. If you look at the humanitarian or standards that India has to become better, India is becoming better compared to previous years. So
thank you, Mr. Vinson. I hope our discussion has shed light on a key geopolitical concerns, particularly the dominance of superpowers in the global economy and the growing call for equitable democratic distributions. The Indo-American partnership holds the promise of fostering progress for humanity. I extend my gratitude Mr. Vinson Palathingal for his exceptional ability to provide precise narrations and clarity on these complex topics. Thank you, and signing out.